Cabin Sports Radio.
Here comes the siren. I want to go higher. Oh, my goodness. Posey will defend. Oh! LeBron James with no regard for human life.
Pass is intercepted at the goal line by Malcolm Butler. Unreal.
Oh, baby, for sure.
Cabin Sports Radio starts now.
Cabin Sports Radio on the Cabin Radio airwaves. Another Monday night has come, and thus, my friend, Unbreakable, Mike Gibbons, and myself, Lecter, will chat an hour of sports talk here on Cabin Radio. And Cabin Sports Radio is always brought to you by our friends over at Sport North. They are moving sport forward, and you can check out sportnorth.com for more on them. Mike, lots going on in the world of sports this week.
Yeah, there sure is. Not crazy breaking stories as we've sort of become accustomed to.
No, that'll be tomorrow.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. On the Tuesday nights after Cabin Sports Radio airs on Monday night. That's usually when we get the big sports news of the week.
As of course is tradition.
Yeah, not so much the case this past week, but still steady news. A lot going on in the world of sports in North America, and we are going to get to it.
We're very well rounded today. We got a little bit of NFL news, some CFL news, some NHL news, some regrettable NBA news, and some kind of nice NBA news. So let's get into all of it on Cabin Sports Radio.
Lecter, not so much a headline, but I'd be remiss if I forgot to mention, this is more for the next time you're having a water cooler conversation. You just want to throw a fun little sports stat at a friend of yours in the workplace or socially, what have you. This is the first time since July of 2005 that someone other than Novak Djokovic, Rafael Nadal, Roger Federer, or Andy Murray, the big, the top four.
There's others?
There's others, apparently.
Oh, my God.
The big four in the world of tennis is no more. For the first time since July 2005, someone outside of those four has cracked the top two in the world ATP rankings, and that is Daniil Medvedev. So I'm just gonna throw that out there for the next water cooler conversation you have. Did you hear the news?
Medvedev.
Yeah,
got it.
There you go. Yeah, first time since 2005 that one of the big four not in the top two. He's the world number 2 now, behind, of course, Novak Djokovic, who is probably going to hang on to that for years and years to come. But there you go.
He just set a record, as the longest reigning number 1. I think he just passed Roger Federer for the world record for the longest reigning number 1.
Just keeps racking up those titles at the Australian Open.
But nevertheless, the dawn of a new era.
That's right. So pay attention to that name, Medvedev. Maybe he ascends to the world number 1 ranking before we know it.
Medvedev.
You got it. You got it. All right, next time.
Okay.
There you go. We'll get into the headlines now. And last week, ESPN and the NHL announced a new long-term agreement that will return the Stanley Cup Finals to ABC and put hundreds of games on ESPN Plus, the network's streaming service. According to the terms of the deal, which begins next season, ABC will broadcast 4 Stanley Cup Finals over the next 7 years, and ABC and ESPN will air 1 conference final every year.
That's right. ESPN has not aired a hockey game since the Big Four.
That's right.
Since there was someone outside of that and a winner of in tennis or whatever you just said. Medvedev. Okay. That's kind of crazy. I thought that we were kind of just done with ESPN and hockey. I did not see that being any part of the NHL's future, really. I mean, it has been, since 2004, since they have had a television contract with the NHL. And I don't really know what has changed that has, all of a sudden made the NHL a attractive option again for ESPN. I don't know, maybe the bowling ratings haven't been dropped. Good.
Ever since that one viral clip of the guy saying, Who are you are I am, or who are you I am. It's viral. YouTube it. It's good. It's television gold.
It's one of the greatest moments in sports history.
I'm fired up now just thinking about it. But you pick pretty much any sport in the great United States of America. It's probably above hockey.
Yeah.
You pick any college sport, college football, college basketball. We got some March Madness details coming out. Another fun fact that I'm just going to throw at you right now because it just popped in my head.
Yeah.
This is the first time since I want to say the mid-'70s that Kentucky and Duke did not qualify on the men's side of the bracket for the big dance.
Oh, wow.
March Madness. I know, it's crazy.
Huh.
We're so used to seeing those even in the top four year in and year out. There were, and I'm not totally briefed, there were some COVID issues that made that, I think, on the Kentucky side.
Okay.
But either way, that's the first time, we're going back decades, that those two will not be in the dance. They don't even qualify for the March Madness on the men's side of the bracket. Yeah, pretty crazy.
There's going to be a lot of fringe March Madness pool participants who are just just Kentucky. Oh, no, they're not.
Yeah.
Who else is there?
Duke?
Yeah. No, not them either.
It's those two and UNC, maybe throw in Georgia.
Yeah.
That are typically
the one that
Michigan.
Michael Jordan played for, right?
UNC. There you go.
Yeah.
Throw in Michigan. Those are going to be Florida, right? Villanova.
Right.
I'm just naming teams at this point, but ones that you always associate with being at the top of those brackets. We won't have two of them this year. So I have now given you two items for your next water cooler conversation.
Medvedev, Kentucky, Duke. Got it.
That's all you need to say.
Okay.
But I guess going back to my point, you can pick pretty much any sport, I think, in the great United States of America. And it's above hockey. The college sports for sure. Yeah. NBA, definitely. NFL, duh. MLB, of course.
Darts, without question.
Equestrian.
Yeah.
Bowling, as you alluded to, because we know that it spawns really high-profile characters.
Yeah. The Lumberjack Challenge games.
Oh, I watch those too.
You can't
UFC, maybe it's surpassed in terms of viewership.
Oh yeah.
Not the case, obviously, north of the border here, but this has to be a big deal for the National Hockey League, injecting $2.8 billion into their coffers over the next few years. So the last time they aired a game, we're going back to 2004. The next year, of course, lockout.
2004, man.
Yeah.
How many players are even still playing?
That's a good...
Joe Thornton.
Yeah.
Jason Spezza. Any other Toronto Maple Leafs?
Yeah. There wouldn't be too many. So this is a big deal for the league and for ESPN just continuing to absorb different sports. Of course, already broadcasting MLB and NBA games. I think in negotiations right now with the NFL. And obviously streaming services are pretty prominent in today's day and age. So I think NBC had the exclusive rights for a decade. I think 2011 to 2022. So at the end of this current season, we've always seen Doc Emrick.
Yeah.
Previously, Mike Milbury.
Right.
We were going to see Mike Babcock before he took his new role with Saskatchewan, the University of Saskatchewan. So that is no more exclusive rights when we're playing NHL 2K or whatever. We won't be introduced by Doc.
Wait, does this mean no more Pierre McGuire?
Maybe he could be. Who knows? Some giants in the commentating business might be looking for work elsewhere or looking to change platforms.
Wow.
I think the thinking is that a lot of NBC's services will now go towards their streaming Peacock services, so they'll be moving a lot of their sports content over there as they sort of restructure a little bit. But ESPN is, the sports giant as far as the United States are concerned. So if this ultimately gets more eyes on the great sport of hockey, then maybe that's a good thing. I'm sure Gary Bettman's pretty pumped about the deal.
Oh, I imagine, yeah. You almost got to wonder if this, and I mean, COVID has affected everything, but you got to wonder if this is one of those kind of, those ripple effects where all of a sudden, as we know, there's been, they actually just started, as of last week, reintroducing live audiences to games. I think the first one was the Philadelphia Flyers versus the Washington Capitals. But up until then, there was no real timeline for getting fans back into the stands. And you got to wonder if all of that kind of forced Gary Bettman and the NHL to be like, okay, we got to think of something else here, because I mean, like the NHL is, as far as the big North American sports, it's one of the most reliant on gate-driven revenues.
Totally.
They're still surviving fine without them.
Yeah.
But I mean, compared to the NBA, the MLB, and NFL, those sports could play years without a live crowd and still make money hand over fist due to their television contracts. You got to wonder if this new reality, and not really knowing for certain what the timeline is to have, 20,000 people back into going through the gates each and every day, and that revenue stream kind of being cut off. You got to wonder if that kind of lit a fire under the NHL's butts. And it was like, okay, I think we might need to talk to ESPN again.
Yeah.
I mean, might need to make them interested in us again. I don't know how they did it, but apparently they did it.
They got her done. We definitely talked extensively about, how the CFL, for instance, is very gate driven in terms of how they generate their league revenues and how important that is for them. But yeah, you're right. Like hockey is maybe not quite as marketable as some of the other sports, probably just from an access standpoint. It's certainly growing up and when you're younger, a lot more difficult to join, just because of affordability can be a real barrier for families.
Absolutely.
So, we're typically seeing in the NHL, your guys coming from Canada, the United States, Nordic countries, Switzerland, Sweden, Finland, Russia, whereas other sports, not those barriers quite in place. So the NBA, for instance, you've got players from African countries, from Asian countries, from South American countries, North America, Europe now. It's a lot of stars coming out of Europe. It's an affordability issue. It's an access issue. So I guess at the end of the day, if being the broadcast giant they are, and certainly one of the sports leaders in the world, this is going to get more people tuned into the sport of hockey. And they're, like you said, getting a little creative. They're going to have to, in terms of how they generate their revenues. There has been some talk as the COVID-19 vaccine rolls out, and I think the states are doing a pretty good job in terms of getting the vaccine out there. Some professional athletes already getting theirs, as the general population and frontline workers do too. And there have been talks already about, all right, when is it time to introduce participants back into the stands? I think I read yesterday that when the MLB season kicks off and we're already into spring training, the Texas Rangers are planning on opening at 100% capacity, which is... That's another thing entirely. Yeah. And obviously the Raptors were just given permission to have, I think, 3,500 fans in front of them in Florida. So, I mean, there shouldn't be snowbirds there, but there probably are.
Probably.
Yeah.
A couple, yeah.
So we'll see. The pandemic has forced us to get a little creative in terms of how we restructure and talk about things like business continuity planning, and maybe we'll see some of these things stick. One thing I saw in the news recently as we're still in the NHL. A lot of Canadian teams are interested in keeping the conference, the All-Canadian Conference, together. So
apparently, I saw a headline about that too during the Toronto Maple Leafs Winnipeg Jets game. And on the weekend, one of the intermissions, they mentioned how I think it was Elliot Friedman maybe who mentioned that apparently the Canadian franchises are going to be pushing for this to be a more permanent thing, which. It's not something that I ever really considered would be a long-term thing, and I don't think it necessarily has anything to do with the current border restrictions that we're seeing, which started this Canadian division, just kind of made it a necessity to actually play an NHL season. But there is something very interesting to the idea that one of the things we often see as we get into like the second, third round of the playoffs is often, depending on how good a season a lot of these Canadian teams are having, you don't have any Canadian franchises left. When you get into the conference finals, Stanley Cup, I mean, there hasn't been a Canadian team in the Stanley Cup finals since...
We're going back to 2011?
Was it 2011?
when the
Vancouver?
Canucks lost to the Bruins. I was going to say Ottawa back in 2017, but they lost in 7 to the Penguins,
right?
Who went on to beat I think it was the Sharks that year back in 2017. Was that their first of 2 in a row, or their second of 2 in a row? Anyways,
Yeah.
but yeah, definitely the Canucks, and they were within 1 game. But the last champion, you're going back to 93 with the Habs.
93. That's right. Yeah. So I mean, that's a pretty good drought
Yeah.
of even a Canadian team having a sniff at winning a Stanley Cup, let alone, being in the conference finals and then the semifinals.
Yeah.
So, and I assume that is what it is. That's the reasoning behind it, is to have a little more CanCon, if you will.
Yeah.
A little more guaranteed into the deeper rounds of the playoffs, which is interesting. I don't know how that's going to go. I don't think that logistically necessarily makes sense for a team like Vancouver, who for a long time, that has been the major complaint of the Vancouver Canucks, is that they have the most intense travel schedule of any team in the league. That doesn't really get solved at all, and in fact probably gets worse for them if there's a Canadian division.
Yeah.
So we'll see if maybe everyone just ignores the Vancouver Canucks as we've become accustomed to in the past, and we'll see where that goes from here.
So some things might stick, some might not. We will see as we get on the other side of this global pandemic. But props to the NHL for seeking out some additional revenues at a time when they're shrinking with no gate sales. And at the end of the day, if it's going to get more people tuning into hockey, that can't be a bad thing. We're going to switch gears to basketball. The Toronto Raptors will reportedly not trade Kyle Lowry ahead of the NBA's trade deadline on March 25th. The star point guard has been the subject of recent trade rumors, including one package that would have sent him to his hometown Philadelphia. But reports out of Toronto now indicate that he will remain a Raptor beyond next Thursday.
And as the resident, lifelong Toronto Raptors fan, how does that make you feel, Mr. Gibbons?
Well, I love Kyle Lowry.
Yeah.
First of all, let me make that abundantly clear right out of the gates. He's the greatest Raptor of all time.
Okay.
It is undisputed. He just passed Chris Bosh last week, another milestone.
Who just got inducted into the Hall of Fame, nominated,
named a finalist. Yeah,
right.
So headlining the class.
That's very cool to see.
Totally, yeah. I had a great run with the Toronto Raptors. Some good playoff runs as well. So the second, I believe, all-time leading scorer for the Toronto Raptors, behind, of course, DeMar DeRozan. Maybe Vince Carter's in there too. And I know DeMar is at the top,
right?
But I believe now with Lowry passing Bosh, I think he's the second all-time greatest scoring Raptor.
And really, after the departure of Vince Carter, Chris Bosh was the next big star.
Yep.
To be drafted by the Toronto Raptors, and then lead the team in. There were some pretty dark years in between for the Toronto Raptors, and then Chris Bosh was drafted and immediately became a star on the team, and then the road to legitimacy kind of started again for that franchise. I imagine, not quite in the same way as Vince Carter, but obviously he did not end his career with the Toronto Raptors. He decided to take his talents to South Beach.
Yep.
And I remember there were some bitter feelings there from Toronto Raptors fans. As you would imagine, it's always tough to lose your star player, which he was one of the best players in the world. Totally. At that time. And I remember that being a really tough pill to swallow, but I would have to imagine by this time, that feeling, those bitter feelings have probably subsided, and Toronto Raptors fans can kind of look at it objectively and appreciate Chris Bosh for the true talent that he was.
Yeah. So of course the departure of Vince Carter, that one stung a lot.
That one was,
especially going to a divisional rival in the New Jersey Nets, and always came back and just torched the Raptors every single time he played them. Remembered how to dunk a basketball again, and for the next 20 years after that too. Good for him. When he said he wasn't going to with the Toronto Raptors anymore. He was tired, you recall.
Yeah.
But then just put on some real good shows as a member of the then New Jersey Nets against the Toronto Raptors. Then you got Chris Bosh coming in still the greatest draft class of all time, the 2003 class. LeBron James going number 1 overall, and then other top lottery picks. You've got Dwayne Wade, Carmelo Anthony, and Chris Bosh. Chris Bosh, I believe, going 4th overall to the Toronto Raptors. The only stinker in the top 4 was Darko Milicic going to the Detroit Pistons. I'm sure they're still kicking themselves over that one because it was a pretty big flub.
How do you lose with a guy named Darko?
Oh, I know. And then you leave someone like Melo or Dwayne or Chris on the board. That's tough. But yeah, he sort of took the mantle from that point on after being drafted. It was one of those not original, but stretch fours who we're seeing so prominently featured in the game now. Guys who can play big inside, but then also be a threat on the outside as well. And definitely took that to another level when he went to Miami, because he had to remodel his game even more, playing with 2 really ball-dominant guys like LeBron James and Dwayne Wade. And I remember, I think it must have been after they secured their second title. So they won in 2010 and 2011. After their second, when he said during the course of an interview that he was a Hall of Famer, and that sort of sparked the conversation of, he actually does have the resume. Is he a Hall of Famer?
Yeah.
And it was because of, the resume that he put together in his time in Toronto. At his peak, he was averaging 24 points, 13 rebounds a game. He was a beast in his prime, and that's exactly when he went off to Miami. Obviously had to sacrifice a lot because there was premier talent there. But without him, they don't get those 2 titles. He got the rebound and passes out to Ray Allen in that Game 6 tying 3 that forced a Game 7, and then they go on and beat San Antonio for their second title in a row in 2011. But then, ever since then, it's been the Kyle Lowry show, and him and DeMar DeRozan first, but then Kyle, and he has been the catalyst ever since. Obviously thrilled that he's going to remain with the club beyond next Thursday.
Yeah, obviously from like a loyalty
totally.
fan perspective, and you got obviously, and every Toronto Raptors fan has a ton of love for Kyle Lowry.
Yeah.
From the business perspective, how do you see this?
Yeah, so, and there was another quote from him in the past week that said, "One way or another, I will retire a Toronto Raptor." So if that's, maybe at the end of this season, and another really big question heading into this offseason is the status of Masai Ujiri, whose deal is also up, and he will be well sought after. So it already has links to Washington, which is where I believe his wife is from, and New York, just given the sheer size of the market and the real challenge it would pose, because they're a really bad team, in a really great market, with really poor ownership. But so that challenge could prove to be enticing enough. He could be the guy to go in there and fix it. And then he's already, his legacy is already undeniable after pulling off one of the gutsiest trades ever for getting rid of the face of your franchise to bring in a 1-year rental, but a superstar talent, best player in the world type character, and Kawhi Leonard winning it, being completely validated. Then, of course, he had that really unfortunate legal battle that he emerged ultimately unscathed from, and was able to tell his story afterwards. But that's a big story about what the future holds for Masai. Bobby Webster, the assistant GM, we know he's going to be in the fold for the next little bit. But maybe they have a conversation, and Kyle's got 1 or 2 years left, and they ink him to an extension worth that, and he plays out his days that way. I kind of read it. Maybe I'm reading between the lines a little bit too much, that maybe at the end of this year he goes elsewhere. And I think the most reasonable landing spot for him would be Philadelphia. They need a point guard. He's from there. Because towards the end of that, he was quoted as saying, if it's a 1-day type contract situation, right? Then maybe that's how he would retire as a Raptor. So, and they're still they're on the outside looking in now. They've obviously had some COVID-19 issues recently. The Raptors have, so they're outside of the playoff picture in the Eastern Conference right now, but it really is a logjam from that 10 to 6 spot. Only a couple games separating all those teams. So, they put a string together here. They get everyone back healthy. They get a good run. They can get certainly right back into that playoff picture, maybe even gun for a home court playoff position.
Right. Yeah.
But really happy he's going to be here beyond the 25th next Thursday. But I wouldn't be surprised if I saw him go to a contender at the end of this season.
And then that begs the question: if the thinking is that he might go somewhere else in free agency anyway, because at face value, when you see a headline that says the Toronto Raptors refute reports that they are going to trade Kyle Lowry, they say they're not going to trade Kyle Lowry before the trade deadline. Automatically, you kind of assume that means, okay, well, then they're probably already talking about a contract extension for beyond next year.
Yep.
Otherwise, the Toronto Raptors are really kind of selling themselves short.
Yep.
Like, this is a guy who you could get some really usable pieces back for the future. And I'm all for loyalty, for player franchise loyalty. I think that's great. I think it's amazing that he feels he feels so at home with the Toronto Raptors franchise and feels like such a part of that team and a part of the city of Toronto that he wants to retire a Toronto Raptor. But in the interest of, is he going to go somewhere after this season anyway?
Yeah.
Why would you not at least keep the option open to making a trade if there is a trade there that makes sense, especially if, the Toronto Raptors are, even since last week when we spoke, have been on a downward trajectory. It's not looking great for their playoff chances at this point in time. So why, if he's going to go somewhere else where, doesn't it just make sense, even to Kyle Lowry? I mean, I don't think that's a slap in the face to trade him. Like, he gets it. He knows how this business works. So you would think that if it's you feel this kind of kinship with the franchise, you want to see the franchise survive and make the smartest moves that it possibly can. Mm-hmm. Part of me is like, this doesn't really make sense that you put on this show of loyalty, which, again, great. Love the loyalty to a player, your franchise player.
Yeah.
Your all-time greatest player. Nobody wants to trade their all-time greatest player. But if the thinking is that he's headed somewhere else in the offseason anyway, why not explore the trade? Why seal that,
And maybe I am reading into it too much, but it was just the small comment about the terming one way or another.
Right.
I will retire a Toronto Raptor.
Yeah.
So, and then he even said, even if it's a one-day type contract, I will retire a Toronto Raptor. And now if reports are being refuted both by the team and by himself, he said, unless you hear it from me or my agent, don't put any stock in it whatsoever. Right. It's not coming from the source. But yeah, just that one line about one way or another, even if it's a one day, that just had me thinking that almost like a decision has been made at this point.
Right.
But I could be completely wrong. Maybe Bobby Webster and Kyle Lowry and his representation are talking already, even if it's 1 or 2 year. Because I believe he's 34 now. So
right.
he's in the twilight of his career, and it's been a Hall of Fame worthy career after leading the Raptors to their one and only title, and continues to put up milestones, as we've already alluded to. So maybe that conversation is happening behind the scenes. It's just, I agree with you.
Yeah.
That's not how I read into it.
I guess there's a few different ways you can interpret that. It remains to be, and maybe nobody knows exactly what that answer is, what the future holds for Kyle Lowry and the Raptors now. But yeah, at face value, it's like, okay, no, we're not going to trade him. He's going to retire a Raptor.
Yep.
So you're going to sign him at the end of the season. It seems like, when you read a little more into it, it's like, okay, maybe there are more lines that to be read in between here than we're thinking at first. But, again, don't know what's going to happen there. Remains to be seen.
Yeah.
Hopefully they just come to an agreement and he plays the rest of his career with the Toronto Raptors.
Yeah.
But if it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't.
Either way, he will have his number raised to the rafters.
Absolutely.
As it should be, number 7. Let's move to some stupid NBA news, and that would be Miami Heat forward Myers Leonard has been suspended for a week and fined $50,000 by the NBA after using an anti-Semitic slur during a live streaming session. Myers used the slur while streaming himself playing Call of Duty Warzone. A number of prominent sports figures have since denounced the hateful slur.
Now, we don't obviously need to shed much light on that. I actually don't even know what the slur was, but you know what? Don't really need to know.
No.
Anti-Semitic pretty much says it all. And, I mean, man, it doesn't really get any dumber than that, does it?
So I'm sure it was, I don't know what the platform was. I'm going to go out on a limb and say it was Twitch.
I'm assuming, yeah.
So one of my, I play Call of Duty Warzone, not so much as during the peak, but they might have a new map coming out, and then I'll just get sucked right back in.
Right.
And one of my friends, especially during the pandemic, I think a lot of people, sudden booms in interest in things like cryptocurrencies, streaming services, and then suddenly, me, for instance, and I don't know if you can say the same. I got back into playing video games.
Oh yeah. Well, I've never got out of it.
Yeah. Anyway. I never mean neither, but now I'm way back in.
Yeah.
And one of my friends, a PC gamer from back home in Ontario, same thing. He wanted to make something of it. It's like, well, maybe if I, hit affiliate and I start getting followers and subscribers and then sponsorships, it's like, I can make it big. It's like, well, let's see how that goes.
And then he threw out an anti-Semitic slur, and that was the end of that?
No.
Okay.
I do not know Myers Leonard on a personal level. But that's exactly what happened. And, even in, my friend circle, whenever he was streaming us playing together, we'd be sort of ribbing each other jokefully, and then we'd say, okay, I'm streaming now, guys.
Right.
Let's keep it PG.
Mind your P's and Q's.
And obviously, we're not getting into any of the slurs or anything. There might be some explicit words here and there, but we're making fun of each other.
Right.
And not in a discriminatory or hateful way, obviously.
Yeah.
Just having some fun. But there always was that, okay, guys, I'm going live now.
Yeah.
Be on your best behavior.
Yes.
Even if there was 3 people watching and it was the 3 people playing. Wasn't much of a platform. Now, if you're a professional basketball player playing in a pretty big market and a pretty renowned franchise like Miami, my estimates are that quite a few people were tuned in to said stream.
Probably more than your friend. Yeah.
Especially when it's a very popular game like Call of Duty Warzone and you're playing on a professional basketball team. Mm-hmm. So, yes, I don't even know, like you, I don't even know what the slur was. I don't want to take any guesses, but it was a hateful and it was a discriminatory slur that was targeted at one group of individuals, being that it was an anti-Semitic slur. There is no place for that, regardless of where it is coming from. But especially when you are streaming yourself. It's not even like you were caught.
Yeah. It's not like your buddy was started streaming and didn't give you the heads up.
Right.
Not that that's an excuse, but it's not going to get out.
No. It wasn't a D'Angelo Russell locker room incident where he was recorded by someone else, snitching on one of his teammates about his extramarital affairs and that kind of thing.
This is very much self-inflicted gunshot wound.
You are going out there on your own platform, I guess forgetting that you're on said platform and saying something hateful against a minority group. So obviously, as you can expect, things did not go well for Myers Leonard. Suspended for a week, fined $50,000 by the NBA. A lot of prominent sports figures. Charles Barkley, who always has something to say.
Well, of course. Yeah.
Just called him stupid.
Yeah.
I think there was another.
Not really much more to say than that.
There isn't. I think there's another basketball player that said he's stupid as hell. I can't remember who that was. Julius Edelman, who I think identifies as Jewish American.
Okay.
Came out saying hate is like a virus. And it is. Issues of like that. There's no place for these discriminatory remarks.
And you need, if there's any sort of benefit of the doubt, maybe he threw out a word. Again, don't know what the word was, but maybe threw it out just knowing it was a 4-letter word, didn't actually know what it meant.
Right.
That is like being the most benefit of the doubt you could possibly be about this situation.
Yep.
The bottom line, you're a public You're a public persona. You need to be a little more aware of things than that. It's not an excuse.
Yeah.
And it's just stupid.
Yeah.
That's really all you can say about that.
Yeah. So now what we need to do is find out the person who forced him to say that. Where I'm guessing, if we're playing, it was in a battle royale. Probably.
He was hacked, of course.
Well, that maybe, yeah.
Wasn't even him playing.
I'm willing to bet he was playing the battle royale mode, and some little kid took him out in a way that really upset him, and that kid has now canceled Myers Leonard, but rightfully so because he's said some really stupid things.
We'll be back on Cabin Sports Radio.
You're listening to Cabin Sports Radio, brought to you by Sport North, moving sport forward.
Cabin Sports Radio brought to you each and every week on Cabin Radio by Sport North, moving sport forward. Check out sportnorth.com for everything going on with sport in the North, and always have a thought towards the Kids Sport NWT program, which is facilitated by Sport North. Fantastic program, getting kids off the sidelines if it's soccer, off the bench if it's hockey, and yada, yada, yada. Fantastic program. And of course, all proceeds that go to Kids Sport NWT stay in the North.
All right, Lecter, we're going to resume our Cabin Sports Radio headlines and now turn our gaze to professional football. Quarterback Tom Brady has signed a contract extension with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. While the team did not reveal any details, sources suggest it is a 4-year contract extension that voids to a 1-year extension, tying Brady to Tampa through the 2022 season.
What does that mean? A 4-year extension?
I was curious myself. So I think throughout his career, Tom Brady has been known to restructure deals over the course of the contract.
Okay.
And usually it is to maintain cap flexibility. So I think this move alone, and I thought I saw a number like, 1 year, $41 million extension. I thought that was a number that was reported.
Okay.
But by structuring it in certain ways, whether it's front heavy, back heavy, if bonuses are involved, one thing that he's been known to do over the course of his career is restructure deals while they are being played out. So I think this move itself will save the organization somewhere in the neighborhood of $19 million.
Okay.
Which will be a way for them to bring back their core.
I'm seeing a lot of wording. I just brought up an article now, and I'm seeing a lot of wording. Avoidable. This.
It's a little confusing.
It's very confusing.
Yeah. So I think really what he has been known to do is leave money on the table as a means of bringing back other free agents. So, obviously Gronk, Rob Gronkowski, is a free agent. A number of players on their lines who we knew were very effective during the Super Bowl victory. So they've got a number of marquee free agents now. So hopefully with this cap space, close to $20 million, this will allow them to re-ink some of those players. His plan sent out a tweet shortly afterwards. LFG, which of course we know stands for. I'm just kidding. I'm not going to get.
I have no idea.
I'm not going to get LFG.
I don't know.
LFG Buccaneers. Let's go.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm not going to get Cabin Sports Radio in trouble with the CRTC or what have you.
We already came close enough in that last segment.
I know. Yeah. So we're gonna be on our best behavior for the rest of the program and beyond. So he's ready. He's just fresh off Super Bowl number 7. He made it known that he is going for number 8, and he's going for it this year. This is what he does. He's always left money on the table. I saw a funny meme afterwards, and it was, like other quarterbacks in the league signing record-breaking contract extensions, leaving no money for other signatures.
Right.
And then there's Tom Brady, always taking deals so that he can surround himself with premier talent, and they can go deeper. And then other quarterbacks saying, what's he doing different? I was like, well, he's sacrificing. Everyone knows he's the greatest quarterback in the game now and forever, but he sacrifices, and he's always left money on the table so that he can surround himself with premier talent. So this is another indication that he's willing to do that, and he's coming for number 8.
And let's be honest, by this point, Tom Brady has made his money and then some. He has cashed in over a 20, whatever it is, year career now. Yep. I guess a 20-year career.
20-year career.
There's no void to fill as far as the coffers of Tom Brady goes with regards to contract money. He's made his money. If he wanted to retire, he would not be shortchanged or anything like that. Tom Brady is going to be financially secure, but at this age, the fact that he came into this year with a 1-year contract, was a 1-year shot, or was it a 2-year contract?
Pretty sure. I thought it was 1.
Was it a 1?
Yeah.
Okay. Came in, either
Actually,
way.
no, it must have been 2 because this one will now see him tied into the end of the 2022 season.
Oh,
so
okay.
yeah, I think it was a 2-year.
Gotcha. But he probably restructured that too.
He's gonna. Yeah, there'll be several restructurings. Yeah. We'll hear more.
Either way, I mean, the conventional wisdom seemed to be that this was his last year.
Yeah,
he was going for glory. I mean, at this age, you would think that would be the odds-on bet.
Yeah.
Because he's got to retire sometime, like you're on borrowed time already. I mean, you're the greatest quarterback in the history of the game. You were arguably, and there was only a slim argument against it coming into this past season. Mm-hmm. Now there's no argument whatsoever. You just won another Super Bowl. What left is there to prove for Tom Brady other than being maybe the first quarterback in NFL history to win back-to-back Super Bowls twice in his career? Yeah. Like, what else is there?
There's not much.
I guess there's a few personal records. Like I don't know which ones.
Actually,
off the top of my
we're
head.
going to get to one of them in the next headline. I will just say, though, that there have been a lot of social media posts that obviously don't age well. And some of them have had to do with Tom Brady's decision to go to Tampa. The pundits and the experts and the analysts saying, well, he's going there to just play out the rest of his career on a beach, which is exactly what the same analyst said about LeBron James going to Hollywood to make movies. He's just concentrating on Space Jam 2. He doesn't care about basketball. He's checked out. He's won his titles. He's solidified his legacy. He's just going to go play out his days on West Beach.
Right.
And then they both go there and win titles in either their first or second year with their new clubs. So I am not going to say anything that can come back to bite me later. The only prediction I offered recently was that the Toronto Maple Leafs are going to. You probably saw my post last week that the Toronto Maple Leafs are going to win the 2021 Stanley Cup. And I'm sure I won't eat those words later.
I was going to reference that as another social media post, I believe from 2013, that your better half resurfaced in the midst of that conversation that really fell under that bracket of social media posts that did not age so well. What was that after Game 6?
Oh no, no! That was in Game 7, 2013, Toronto versus Boston. Toronto takes a 4-1 lead on a Nazem Kadri goal.
Yes, of course.
In the third period now, we're 10 minutes left. And there was a lot of back and forth in the media back then. This was a pretty hyped up series. Two divisional rivals, a city like Boston, a city of champions. In the time that the Blue Jays won their last World Series in '93, while the Celtics have won, they won in 2008. The Red Sox won all the time.
Right.
The Bruins were always successful, and then of course you got the New England Patriots who won every second Super Bowl for a decade. So there's a lot of vitriol. There's a lot of anger in the media, and Boston was having fun at Toronto's expense. So that's when I infamously proclaimed, thanks for coming out, Boston. With 10 minutes left, and the rest is history, of course. Boston scores the next 3 goals, forces overtime. Patrice Bergeron scores the overtime winner.
Props to you for not deleting that tweet.
It's still there.
It's still there.
And my friends love to throw it in my face. I get it all the time. Thanks for coming out. I get that all the time.
Yeah.
So some certain things don't age very well. We've come to know that. So you will not see any slander from me.
No.
Being thrown at professional athletes, especially ones who are in the GOAT statuses.
Let it never be questioned Mike Gibbons' integrity and that he learns his lessons.
That's right. No more slander on my timeline, that's for sure. So we were talking earlier about some personal milestones that he could hit. Well, we're going to get to one of them right now. Some other developing news out of the NFL. The Drew Brees era with these New Orleans Saints has come to an end. Brees, the NFL's leader in career completions and yards passing,
there it is,
has decided to retire after 20 NFL seasons, including his last 15 with New Orleans. Brees won the Super Bowl, the only one of his career, back in 2009.
Now, Tom Brady did have some kind parting words for Drew Brees on the news that he was announcing his retirement.
Yep.
I think they have a pretty healthy mutual respect for one another. Battled back and forth just these past NFL playoffs in another chapter in their history. And I mean, they've both been, for the better part of the last 20 years, two of the top 5, top 3, arguably, quarterbacks in the league.
Yep.
Every year. So this is it's not close as far as Super Bowl victories goes, but as far as just proficiency at their position, yeah, Drew Brees, Tom Brady, and I think you throw Peyton Manning up there.
Yep.
Those were the 3 guys.
Yep.
And so yeah, that's and you got to wonder. And I don't think it did, but it is interesting the timing of the announcement coming out that Tom Brady.
Are you going to throw shade?
Maybe. It's just a little kind of funny, the timing.
Yeah.
Tom Brady says, I'm coming back. Drew Brees says, all right, there's my decision made for me. I'm out.
That's a wrap, folks. Call it a career.
Tired of losing to this guy.
There was you'll probably recall, there was a nice moment with them. Would have been, I guess, the divisional championship round when the Buccaneers bounced the Saints, where they were playing on the field with their kids after the game.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people at that time, it was something that they were preparing themselves for, that this would be the last time that we would see Drew Brees playing a professional game. And now we get that closure. So I think it was much speculated, but now it's official that he's played his last NFL game. Resume as tight as they get at the quarterback position, solidified even further with his Super Bowl win back in 2009. But yeah, the all-time leading in terms of career completions and yards passing probably will be broken this year by Tom Brady.
And if not this year, then the next year.
And the next year, or he'll play until he's 50, which he probably hasn't ruled out. But yeah, a legendary, great career for Drew Brees. Really brought them back into the fold. I think 9 of 15 seasons he spent with New Orleans. They qualified for the playoffs. Which was a pipe dream for them. They had some struggling years before he came into the fold. So brought them back to championship status, but also in terms of relevancy as well, put them back on the map. So a really, really sound career for Drew Brees, and I think the game will miss him.
We're going to end with a little bit of CFL news, Mike. We haven't talked CFL on...
It's been a while.
Yeah, on the show for quite a while, but never in the past... I don't even know how many years have I seen so much news pertaining to the CFL, because, of course, it was announced this past week that CFL Commissioner Randy Ambrosie and Dwayne Johnson, a.k.a. The Rock, have been in talks with regards to some kind of collaboration with the CFL and the XFL.
Wow.
That's right. Not quite the same XFL as the one Vince McMahon started back in 2001, which, of course, famously died after 1 year.
Yep.
But the XFL that resurfaced, it was brought back to life in 2020, only to be cut short in its first season back because of the COVID-19 pandemic.
Of course.
Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, in recent months, sometime in the last 6 months, bought in to the XFL as part of the ownership group, which obviously added a ton of clout.
Oh, yeah.
And legitimacy.
That'll do that.
He'll do that. And and only recently has the news surfaced that they have been in some sort of talks with the CFL. Now, details are pretty vague at this point as to what that means, what has been discussed, what their ideas are, but there has been a lot of talk about this because, of course, the CFL had to cancel its entire season, its entire 2020 season because of the COVID-19 pandemic. And a lot of CFL fans have been a bit worried since then that an already fragile league that runs on a shoestring budget compared to every other professional outfit out there, that might have been a bit of a death blow for the league. It has not been the case. There is every indication that the CFL will be returning for a 2021 season.
Good.
Whether that is at full capacity with fans in the stands or not, that remains to be seen. We kind of alluded to it earlier that the CFL is a majorly gate-driven
big time
league and relies on those gate revenues to survive. And that was the big reason why they decided that they could not have a season in 2020. On top of everything else, not having fans was just going to cost the league way too much with regards to operations expenses. So that already had CFL fans on edge. Now you add to this supposed talks of collaboration with a league that in the world of professional football has I would say, spotty reputation at best. Again, you go back 19 years, just the name the XFL. Now, I don't know if you remember when the XFL first broke in. Vince McMahon decided that he was absolutely going to take on the NFL and take the sport of football to brand new highs.
Yeah.
He was going to inject some of that World Wrestling Federation pizzazz, a little bit of that aggression into the game of football and make it even bigger. And of course, the sex appeal.
Yeah.
You couldn't forget the sex appeal. He was going to inject that into the game of football and make it bigger and better than it has ever been, and thus blow away the NFL. It fell well short of that. I believe I remember reading. Actually, there was a really good documentary on the short-lived life of the XFL. After I think the first week, because everyone was intrigued, everyone knew about this, everyone was anticipating this, and then they watched the product, and it was not very good football.
Oh, no.
And after the first week, the television ratings absolutely plummeted. And that kind of set the tone for the rest of the season. They did finish their first season, but that was it. The league folded after 1 year and then was nothing for 19 years until it resurfaced in 2020. And as you mentioned earlier, the first season had to be cut short because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, that was just bad luck.
Yes.
They had very much distanced themselves from that 2001 experiment, that initial phase of the XFL. But once again, you have that professional wrestling influence in there with Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson now buying in. And I will say, Dwayne Johnson penned a very heartfelt letter about his relationship with the CFL because, of course, before his whole professional wrestling career took off and The Rock, as we now know him, was ever a thing, he tried out for the Calgary Stampeders way back in the day. He got cut. And he said that, in hindsight, was the best thing that ever happened to him because it forced him to aspire to something else. He wanted to play professional football. He loved the game his entire life. And in the end, he just wasn't good enough. So he had to figure out something else. The rest is history. He became one of the biggest stars, the biggest star in professional wrestling, and then one of the biggest stars in Hollywood. And arguably in the last 5 years, maybe the biggest star in Hollywood.
I think he has been.
Everyone knows who The Rock is, regardless of if you ever watch pro wrestling.
There's a new spin-off show about his early life coming.
Brand new show based on, loosely based on his childhood called Young Rock. He's a superstar.
He is.
Without question. And he, in very, very loving terms, basically said that he owes that all to the CFL.
Wow.
And specifically mentioned Wally Buono, who is a former longtime head coach and general manager in the CFL, and had a friendship with Wally Buono that lasted years and years. And that's about the only thing that I've seen in this news that comforted me a little bit with regards to the talks. Everything else, especially with Randy Ambrosie and the air of desperation that I get from him, it makes me uneasy.
Can I read you a quote from Mr. Ambrosie?
Yes.
Canada, quote, Canada has an exciting game and devoted fans, and our discussion with the XFL provides a tremendous opportunity to build on that strong foundation. We look forward to exploring how we might work with one of the most innovative sports brands in the world to grow the game, engage fans in new ways, and reach new audiences. We look forward to seeing what possibilities our discussions might uncover and to sharing those with our fans as the process unfolds, end quote.
Now, amongst the Canadian sports media landscape, there has been a myriad of reactions. Some saying this is great news for the CFL, some cautiously optimistic, some saying this might be the end of the Canadian 3-down game as we know it. Basically predicting that don't be surprised if 4-down football is introduced in Canada.
Yeah.
To me, as a lifelong CFL fan, that would effectively be the end of the CFL.
Yeah.
Because that has been the one thing, obviously the bigger field size, various different rules thrown into the game, but the 3-down nature of Canadian football has been the major differentiator to the NFL. Now, Canadian football has always struggled in comparison, since say for the mid to late 70s. Before then, the CFL and the NFL were actually on pretty close to even footing as far as legitimacy and we're arguably competitors as far as professional football leagues go. The CFL at that time had just as good a chance of landing high profile, players coming out of college as the NFL did.
Yeah.
Since that time, you fast forward to the 80s and the 90s, the CFL went through some really tough times financially. It went through some resurgences. The NFL has been the unquestioned leader as far as professional football goes. But as soon as anyone with regards to the CFL starts talking about growing the game of football, that's where I get uneasy. The game of football is already huge.
Yeah.
I don't think it's getting any bigger. And I don't think it's really going to realistically grow outside of North America beyond what it already has. The CFL in recent years, under the guidance of Randy Ambrosie, they've undergone a global initiative to reach out to the European markets, and it actually has been successful. They have had players come from Germany and I think a few from Switzerland, from a few European countries who have made actually pretty decent early careers in the CFL. Is there room for that to expand? I mean, I don't know, but I certainly don't think the answer is changing the game that has been around for over 100 years. There's an interesting perspective I've seen that the CFL has undergone rule changes within its lifetime, which is true, but in the lifetimes of virtually every CFL fan, the game has remained exactly the same.
Yeah.
Someone the Hamilton Tiger Cats owner pointing out that, 100 years ago, you couldn't pass the ball forward. I mean, that is effectively what changed the game from rugby to football.
Right.
So I don't really see that as an apt analogy as to why the game should make massive changes now. I think the CFL eventually is just going to have to accept that it's not going to get any bigger. And if you want this game to survive, you gotta rely on what has gotten it by up until this point, which is the owners being professional sports philanthropists in Canada. It's not a sexy answer, but I think it might be the reality. You're just not ever going to compete with the NFL as it is. So I don't know. A lot remains to be seen there because a lot of the wording from Randy Ambrosie and Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson and XFL, affiliates of other capacities have been very vague, and it's all about very preliminary talks to this point. So it all remains to be seen what any sort of collaboration looks like. But I saw a tweet from longtime CFL analyst Bob Irving, the voice of the Winnipeg Blue Bombers for as long as I've been alive, saying, Randy Ambrosie, he's got some big ideas to grow the game, big aspirations, absolutely. But if you think that he's so desperate that he's going to change the rules, from 3-down football to 4-down, or do anything radical like that to try and break into different markets, you got another thing coming. One of the replies from TSN's Dave Naylor was simply 2 words: "Want to bet?"
Ooh. Ugh. So a little bit more substance from Jeffrey Polak, who is the president and CEO of the XFL. And I'm just going to pull one little quote here. Quote, "Blending the CFL's rich heritage with our fresh thinking and the unique reach and experience of our ownership could be transformative for the game. We look forward to learning more about what's possible together with the CFL and where our shared passion takes us," end quote. A little bit more there to chew on. Hinting at the different angles that they'd be coming from. You got the rich history of the CFL, and then this new brand in the XFL, and where potentially they could go together. Not, Randy Ambrosie being, I think, a little bit more vague.
Yeah, and I mean, at this point, there isn't really much more to report on that. But I can tell you, there's a lot of CFL fans who are scared.
Yeah.
Quite frankly,
Dave Naylor. You want to bet?
Yeah.
That leaves a bit to think about.
Yeah. Shall we end on that dark note?
Yeah.
Well, and I will say, as a lifelong CFL fan and lifelong Winnipeg Blue Bombers fan, that, hey, if this is the end of the CFL as we know it, let it be known that the Winnipeg Blue Bombers went out on top.
They're still on top, baby.
And we will talk to you next week on Cabin Sports Radio.